Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking into our latest TDR Small Cap Sunday podcast. What a week it was for both the cannabis space, some of the announcements pertaining to Attorney General Matt Gaetz, as well the HHS, the leader, Robert Kennedy Jr. was announced. We saw stocks rip. Now I want to say rip, but they definitely performed well over the past week to 10 days, but we did see a sell-off on Friday. But tonight's show, I thought, let's dive into the psychedelic space and feature 4 companies and really follow through and understand when an analyst looks at this, how do they evaluate a company, what their current burn rate is, what their cash reserve is, and whether or not we would own this stock. So tonight's show is all about the psychedelic industry and 4 companies that we want to dive into and learn more about. So with that, let's welcome in TDR lead financial analyst, Bill McNarland. We are both very interested in this space, and I think there's a lot of people that will probably become more interested in this space as this new administration starts to take shape heading into 2025, don't you think?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think it's really important. I actually live in one of the rare jurisdictions in North America where all psychedelics are fully legalized and allowed to be used in a medical context if prescribed by a psychiatrist. And it is something that's providing a lot of benefit to different people.
I forgot they do have that in Alberta, right?
Absolutely. As
I
long
totally
anything,
forgot that.
all of the medicines are allowed to be prescribed by psychiatrists. The challenge is finding the psychiatrists that want to increase
Right.
their knowledge and learn about it, but there is no red tape from the government. They put safeguards in place,
I totally
which is
forgot about that.
wise for now, but it's a jurisdiction that is fully operational.
So, in your view, how does, I guess, this industry look like the outlook look like, I guess, optically, like moving forward? Like, how do you view this as an analyst? I think a lot of people want to truly understand, like, how do you evaluate a company that's really not producing revenue at this time?
Yeah, first of all, you want to find out what they're doing, what is the plan, and where is the government roadblock in their plan, and how long is that expected to take? How
Yep.
long are they along, and how much cash do they have? And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. All these companies, there's only 2 psychedelic companies are in that space that actually have significant revenue. The rest don't. So we have to throw out all the normal things we're looking at on the show. We're going to be looking at what is their process, what are they doing, where are they in that process with the government, and how much cash do they have in the bank compared to how much they're burning, and will that be
What
enough time to get them to success?
even more so, how do you think of this, or what do you think of this industry politically moving forward?
Well, it can surprise you. I think, for example, I live in a right leaning jurisdiction that is
Right?
fully legal medical use. And that's because people saw
That's
that there
telling.
was benefit, but they put safeguards in place. So I think likely we're moving down the path that these medicines are being considered, but governments are going to put safeguards in. And also, they may go even farther with safeguards if they're a little bit nervous. Their own education is not there.
Right.
So it's going to take time, unfortunately, with the government. Just like any application, whether it's for immigration or anything you want to do with the government, it's not extremely efficient. But it appears that the United States is moving more into efficiency when it comes to government with announcements in the last 2 weeks. So it'll be interesting to see what plays out. I don't think it's necessarily a
Do you
left
read?
or right thing.
Yeah. Do you read much into that with the RFK appointment?
Um, well, I think there's going to be more focus on health. Obviously, someone who was leading on the right thought that that was a wise decision to make for the greater good of the country and bringing people
Yeah.
together. And that's fine. But there's still going to be considerations. He even if he does that in that appointment fully for a long period of time, he doesn't have free reign outside of Congress and the Senate to do whatever he wants. It's going to be closely watched, but people are going to be looking for science and evidence. But I'll tell you one thing that everyone is concerned about in the United States, especially, is veterans' health.
Oh, 100%. And
And
that's where
so
you start.
yeah, if there's something that can help veterans, this is something that both the right and left are very concerned about.
Yep. All right. So overall, we're going to look at how many companies are publicly listed now, and what would you say from an analyst standpoint is the general sense of the industry as it sits right now? because I guess that everything we just outlined, yes, there is some optimism in the air, but we saw the news obviously in the summer with Lycos. I think we're kind of maybe over with some of these appointments that were announced this week. It's kind of closing the door, and the hangover of Lycos and how that all performed is now behind us. Would you say that? Because I know the industry got hit hard from those results back in August.
Well, Lycos had an issue. Brightmind is up 3,462%.
So
If this
throw your
describes
hangover
our
out.
discussion today, yeah, there was Lycos, but there was Brightmind.
Yeah.
So we can, it's going to be all over the map, and all these stocks are going to have tremendous runs up and runs down on their path to success. And there's going to be opportunities to make and lose money going forward. It's not going to be a straight line.
Did you buy that stock?
No, it was,
Me
but it was interesting to, it's interesting to think about when we're
It brought
talking about
attention
this
back to
show.
the space. It brought attention back to the space for sure. But before we go any further, all views on the TDR Small Cap Sunday podcast and the guests on this podcast are purely opinion. You should not treat any opinions by us or guests as investment advice. The views on this podcast are solely intended to be informational and are not investment advice. Okay. Based off of that, what we've just outlined, we're going to focus on 4 specific companies here tonight. MindMed, which trades in the NASDAQ, GH Research, Compass Pathways, and ATAI Life Sciences, all NASDAQ-listed companies. So some questions before we get into each company. What would you say are the key political challenges and opportunities for psychedelic medicine under the incoming administration, and how might these influence the regulatory landscape?
Well, I think first of all, let's start with a red flag. So the first red flag is there was some votes in the recent election where people wanted to push forward the agenda of psychedelics in certain jurisdictions, and most of them were defeated. So this
Yeah,
tells us that currently there's many voters that are
good point.
quite conservative about this area. So that's one to look at. But then there's a couple green flags. I think there's some interesting influence in the Trump administration currently. You look, Elon Musk has
Yeah,
publicly
the Canada
talked about, yeah, so that's one. We already talked about RFK Jr., but we look at people that are involved in the Make America Healthy again. There's individuals that are very interested in psychedelics. And you also look at Peter Thiel has quite a influence on JD Vance. And he's been very outspoken as an investor about psychedelics. And also, in the last time that Trump was president, he was very concerned about getting veterans the medicine that could help them. And he
Yeah.
was promoting the use that they should consider the use of something very similar to ketamine. And so, this is
Mm.
something that makes me think that probably the current climate is moving forward, not backwards, but it's still going to take time.
Well, I look at, like you said, Peter Thiel, who's obviously invested into ATAI Life Sciences, as well as Elon Musk, his stance on it all and free speech, but Vivek Ramaswamy being involved too, and he's obviously a billionaire from the biotech industry. But I think one thing that we do have to make clear is that anyone thinking that psychedelics will be passed recreationally is like defeats the whole purpose as to what the industry is all about. And that's about getting the proper medication, proper education. But from there, it's all about therapy as well that you're going to need, because I think from what I've learned in this space is that finding the right compound for the right person can change your life, but it kind of wakes you up. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cure all problems instantly overnight. If anything, it starts to guide you in a new direction, but ultimately you got to work towards that, right?
Absolutely. I was speaking to a gentleman that owns an ibogaine clinic in Mexico, helping
Yep.
individuals get off heroin, and he was telling me like the simple things. He says, he asked people, when you're going back home from Mexico to the United States, are people in your household going to be using heroin?
No.
And often they are.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, they are, obviously.
They
But if you
are.
want to get,
And so if you want to get clean, you're on your flight back to Cincinnati or wherever it is, and you're going to a house where people are using. There's
yeah,
so many other things that have to be done besides the treatment, changing your environment, maybe changing your habits, getting some exercise or whatever it is, or changing your
yes.
employment. So this is just one thing that's helping people, but still there's a lot of a process around it as well.
All right. So, given the volatility in the psychedelic investment space, what strategies should investors, I guess, adapt when it comes to navigating the risks, and how might institutions approach like
Y-
indexing help? Like, how do they view this, and how do they approach
Yes.
it?
So institutions, they buy multiple biotechs
Yep.
with people that they believe in and in processes, and they hope that some hit it out the park and they know some are going to fail. So you just don't buy your favorite one. You look at them and you say, okay, the names that we're looking at today, would I own it, put it into my own personal index of psychedelic companies?
Gotcha. So, what specific metrics and I guess indicators should analysts focus on, I guess, when evaluating companies?
Yeah, so you want to see how far are they in the FDA process? How many years do they have? So if you
Yep.
find out that a company's, near the end, they don't need as much burn. Maybe they need 2 years worth of burn in as a company. But companies that have their early stages of trials, they need a lot more. So we're going to see some examples of different amounts of capital that companies have, because if they start to get to the end of the capital, they're either going to have to dilute or they're
Yep.
going to have to raise debt or a merger and acquisition. So that's one thing I'd be looking at. Those are the
The
two
develop
main things that we're looking at. Where are they on the development cycle and how much money do
right.
they have?
Yeah. So, if a drug is approved, how then does an analyst, I guess, estimate like the total addressable market? How is that all worked out? Because we always hear numbers like this and they sound fancy, but when you do look at that, how is that basically calculated?
Well, you look at what the need is to solve, but you have to be cautious here. So I live in a jurisdiction where LSD can be prescribed by a psychiatrist. Is that increased the demand for LSD in the province of Alberta? Probably not a huge amount, because not every psychiatrist views that as a solution today
Right.
for something. So it's going to be a
Absolutely.
time of education that still people are going to have to go around. They're going to have to meet with doctors who are prescribing, whether they're a psychiatrist or others, and educate them. So all this takes time. So it's not just that it gets approved and it's big. There still has to be a time of ramp up.
Well, some of the controversial things too is how much does AI, enter into this space? And I think to a certain point, but not to the point where it replaces a doctor or practitioner involved, because you can't administer this stuff when you're at home. Obviously, too, it's just what happens from the transition that you're at a clinic to like where you go home. These are questions that insurance companies have as well. Like this is stuff that there's so much murkiness involved in this space, and I don't know what the answer or solution to that is, but there's still so much. Even when you got drug development finished, probably the even bigger challenge that's going to be for this industry is just the overall infrastructure that needs to come into play across America, and that is going to take a long time.
Correct. So the big upside is that a company proves themselves, and a big win can be not waiting for a rollout. They get bought by a pharmaceutical company or whatever. Shareholders do very well. The big risk is that the companies, they run out of cash, or they're successful and they don't have enough cash in the bank or can't raise enough capital to see through the ramp up. And so
Yeah.
there's different ways that it can happen, but we want to make sure that companies are progressing and they
Yep.
have cash for the foreseeable uh, future so that they can get to the next stage of progress.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of consolidation, or buyouts and mergers and acquisitions, pertaining to this space in 2025. Kind of like what Atsuka did with Mindset Pharma. I think that's roughly about a year ago, maybe longer now. But I can really see some of these leading companies with the data that they're providing and the team that they have in place. Could you not see a big pharma company actually swooping in sooner rather than later? Especially when you look at Spravato from Johnson and Johnson and how that is $1 billion drug now. Like it's advanced quickly.
Jamie Dimon was quoted in Bloomberg. I think it was yesterday. I was reading an article. The CEO of JP Morgan, he was saying that for investment bankers right now, the light switch has completely been turned on for mergers and acquisitions with the change of government in the United States, and all kinds of combinations, whether it's a lumber company or a psychedelic or a biotech. There's just
Exactly.
so much activity right now for mergers and acquisitions that'll be up and coming. So this is an area as well that we'll have. But the other thing too to take note of, the leadership of the psychedelics going forward is not necessarily in the United States. The UK and Europe are very strong as well.
UK
And
is
I
so
think
strong.
there's more progress potentially in investor appetite for taking out those companies. And so that's something I think there's, the two leading schools in psychedelic research are both in the United Kingdom, one in London and one in Liverpool. And so it's really Europe and the UK, I think, that's taking charge of this area.
Cambridge and Oxford, right?
John Moores University in Liverpool has a huge donation, or a left trust has put in that they're doing research involving psychedelics, not FDA trials, but what happens after someone takes a psychedelic or has an experience. How do they integrate it into their lives? And
Yeah.
so that's a big opportunity that's coming out of the UK.
Yeah, let's not forget about John Hopkins as well in the US. But hey,
Yep.
let's jump into our first company, MindMed. No one needs any introduction. This company has really grabbed everyone by the attention over the past little bit. Incredible data that they're producing, great research taking place. We had an episode on Friday during our live stream. Dan from the Chart Guys was on and really showed the long-term floor as to what's been building for this stock. It has performed well. So based out of New York City, current share price $8.38, market cap 615 million. Shares outstanding 73 million, daily trading volume 6.5 million in the 52-week range. And this is a big gap, $2.42 to $12.22. So, like anything, what's their current cash position for this company right now? Because drug development is expensive.
So as of September 30th numbers, they had about $300 million in cash. That gives them a runway into 2027 based on their current operating plan. They have
There's the
two phase
commercialization.
3 trials. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
So
there's the commercialization.
yeah. So when we look at that, general anxiety disorder is huge. They have a phase 3, and it's designated as breakthrough therapy. So the FDA
Yeah,
is trying to go faster on it, and they're
yeah,
doing a major depressive disorder. Phase 3 is being planned, so it's in the progress. And also they have something that's preclinical for autism, but they're closer to the end of the process. One has breakthrough therapy designation, and they have lots of cash, and they have a plan. So when we look at this. This is the model that we say, oh, okay, I'm not worried about this company disappearing next year,
yes.
and they have a plan going forward.
Well, you got to have money, that's for sure, if you're conducting these trials because they're very, very expensive. Memory serves me correctly. I'm just looking it up right now, but I think Prozac at one time, the drug had like $110 billion market cap, if I'm correct. Yeah, I'm just looking right now. Huge, even more. But it goes to show like what this could turn into and how it could change, because everybody talks about SSRIs, and some of the most effective ones are improving people's lives by 5 to 10%. But some of the data that is coming out, there's not even a comparison. So you can get an idea as to why I think big pharma companies, and to your point with Jamie Dimon, we could see mergers and acquisitions take place. And if the data continues, MindMed comes to the forefront as to, the first psychedelic stock that would probably grab a big pharma's interest. So moment of truth, would you own the stock? That's probably overwhelming. Yes.
So this would be a stock I would put in my personal portfolio of psychedelics for to
Yes.
build that exposure. I see that they have runway. They're doing things. Do I know? Do I predict myself personally? Are they going to be able to get their approval and such? No, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for in a company that they have the runway and that there's a market for it, and the FDA likes it. They got breakthrough therapy, so they're put it on their desk. But I can't predict what the FDA is going to do. But this is an example where you're still taking risk, but it's a calculated risk.
Okay. Second company, GH Research, PKC. Trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol GHRS. They're actually located in Dublin, Ireland. Current share price $8.70. Market cap 466 million. Shares outstanding 52 million. Daily trading volume is a half a million in 52-week range for the share price $5.05 to $14. Okay, let's go back to the charts and look at some of the trials that they have going on right now. And what are you finding as far as the most extensive?
So this is earlier concept. So they have phase 2B and a phase A and a second phase A than a phase one. So they need
Yep.
more of a runway. So when I look at this, the next thing we got to look at is this has to be a better cash situation than we looked at with MindMed because they need a lot more time. So that we're going to look at now when we start looking at their balance sheet.
Okay. Current cash position is showing what?
$193 million dollars, and their full spend on cash flow, leverage free cash flow, was negative 30 million last year. So this tells us they probably have 7 years.
Hmm.
So this is an example. It's a well put together balance sheet considering that they're in phase two of their trials.
Okay. Great. So based off that 7-year run rate, moment of truth, would you own the stock?
I would add this into my personal index of psychedelic exposure.
Yeah. Very good companies, the first two, that's for sure. And a company, GH Research, that I don't think gets a lot enough attention or conversation about, but definitely a stock that you should keep your eye on. All right, two green check marks. Third company, arguably the biggest company in the industry, Compass Pathways. They recently ran into some challenges with their recent trial, and as a result, stock's been hit actually lately. But they trade on the NASDAQ, CMPS, located out of London. Current share price $5.50, market cap 334 million, shares outstanding 68 million, daily trading volume 4.5 million, and 52-week range is $4.05 to $12.75. Their main trial is Comp 360, and like I said, ran into some challenges recently. So tread lightly, I think, with this company right now. But this at one time was the darling of the space. How do you currently view it, Bill?
Well, I look at I'm not going to know for sure what the FDA is going to do. But when I look at it, I see that they have a phase three ongoing. They have their phase two completed. They have a preclinical. They have $207 million in cash. Their operating expenses for 2024 full year are expected to come in at about 120 million. So I
Okay.
see, if they're burning 10 million a month, they probably have about 20 months of capital. So when I look at this, this would be more risk than the first two companies, but also the potential, if they get some good news, the potential of running up is much higher as well, because right now there's been some bad news priced in.
Yeah.
And we
How
saw in
does
the examples of the best, of the top performing psychedelic companies, we know they can really run if they get better news than expected.
so would this be like off limits then for a big pharma company when it comes to acquiring another company because they don't take any risks whatsoever? How would they view something like this then?
I think they do take calculated risks.
Do they?
I'll give you an example. I'll step back. Institutional investors that focus on biotech will take more calculated risks than pharmaceuticals. That still would be an institution. But a pharmaceutical company typically wants to get further along in their success before they would come in. But they will capture their attention if they do make some progress or the news is better than expected in the marketplace.
Okay. So moment of truth, would you own this stock?
I would add it to an index of psychedelic companies that I would own with the acknowledgement that there's a chance for higher upside and higher risk with it, but that
Yes.
still would be reasonable, yeah, an accepted risk in an index of psychedelic companies.
All right. So three green check marks, but proceed with caution on this one, even though it's, like you said, probably the darling of the space at one time. But it's amazing how the tables have turned. MindMed, which came out strong and really grabbed a lot of people's interest in this space, ran into some tough times with early management, but has completely righted the ship with Dr. Robert Burrow as the CEO. And he's been slow and steady with his head down for the past couple of years, and they kind of lead the way. But Compass, still very much a viable company, but a little bit more high risk compared to the first two. All right, now time for our final company here tonight, and it's ATAI Life Sciences founder Christian Egermeyer. This is a company that IPO'd back in June of 2021. Largest IPO that the industry ever experiences, over $1 billion. At one time, it hit 2.29 billion. Today, market cap, looking at it now, is 229 million. They've run into some challenges. Stock's been hit hard over the last probably 18 months to 24 months at the minimum. But when you look at these four companies, Bill, would you say this is the biggest high risk amongst the four right now?
Yeah, we're moving today in order of risk. And so this would
Right.
have a higher risk profile, but also would have a higher return profile if news is positive.
Why is that? Can you explain a little
just
further?
just because consensus has turned against the company. And so
Mm,
we look at different companies that had huge rides this year. It's not the companies where the good news was already priced in. It's where companies had bad news priced in.
yeah.
So with biotech, there's going to be volatile with all the companies for sure. But the higher risk, higher return is more where the profile becomes. So it's not just necessarily companies. Some companies will look at it will look awful in biotech, and we've seen this in small cap Sunday before, and we were just like, I don't think anything's coming out of that. They can't last another 2 months.
Yeah.
But these the companies, this would be an example of a higher risk company when we look at where they are in progress and how their balance sheet is. But if some good news comes, likely the upside is pretty high.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? But again, wishful thinking at sometimes can get people obviously in trouble, especially at biotech small cap stocks. But we've had conversations with Christian Egermeyer in the past. He's not concerned whatsoever. Still is very confident on the direction and the research that the company is currently conducting. But trades in the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol ATAI, located in Berlin, Germany. Current share price $1.54. Market cap 229 million, as I said. Shares outstanding 167 million, and daily trading volume is 1 million. 52-week range for the share price is $1.02 to $2.85. I remember when this company IPO'd, it was over $16. So, to your point, it's been hit hard, Bill, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and so we look at where they are in their pipeline. Everything is phase two, or preclinical, or they have one phase 1, 2A ongoing. So they still need more time. Now we look at their runway. They have about $95 million in working capital. Their leverage free cash flow was negative $79 million last year. So they're going to have to lower their spending. If they don't, they probably have something like 14 or 15 million months left before they have to do something. So
Yeah.
this would be a higher risk situation. But as you can say, there's confidence in management that it's not as concerning. But so when I would look at this situation, this is a high risk, high return biotech type situation. Big pipeline. If they have positive news, we've seen that they had over a $2 billion market cap at some time. They likely would take off, but this one would be one to be cautious about. And as
So
we
you think
went
they'll
in
have
the
to raise?
show, we put
You
more
do
risk
think that
each time.
they'll have to? You think they will have to raise money eventually?
Well, I think all of these companies are going to have to raise money eventually, but it's fine to do that after your share prices went way up and people are super excited. So
Yeah.
all these capital stacks are not going to get people all the way through likely.
Yeah.
But
So
you never want to be raising money when you're down. You only want to be raising money when people are excited.
100%. These two companies, Compass and ATAI, are attached to the hip. ATAI owns 19% of Compass Pathways. So as Compass goes, ATAI goes in a lot of ways. Hasn't been always the case, but that's something obviously to remember for a lot of our investors or viewers that are watching this space. All right. So, moment of truth. Would you own this stock?
These four companies I would own, including a tie, and I would put them together in a little package, and that would be my psychedelic exposure. I would continue to monitor it. If some was way up, I would sell off and reinvest. If some was way down, I may consider adding a bit more, but I would look at it as a package, like I have a small ETF portfolio
Yeah.
for the larger companies in the space.
So, when you look at how hard biotech's been hit over this past administration, do you feel that that's going to change going into this new administration? I guess some final notes for people to really understand the roadmap ahead, not only with these companies, but let's face it, when it comes to regulation, it's no easy task. But do you feel biotech is bound to rebound?
I would say, well, I say psychedelics. I'll say out of the greater, more specifically, this is an area that I think governments and people should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
But in long run, and it's an area to have potentially some exposure to recognize that there's going to be huge up and downs, and those may be opportunities that you want to take some money off the table when you've had a good ride. But it's something to pay attention to And the
Yeah.
way to go about it, if you want the exposure, is to add a few of the good quality names, and we'll talk about different ones on the show and buy them together. I'll tell you the worst thing you want to do. I met someone once that was explaining to me that 2 or 3 years ago, their analysis simply was psychedelics could solve a lot of problems in the future. Let's put most of my money in psychedelics because as people understand that, the stocks, so my whole portfolio will go up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the way. It's a portion of your portfolio, likely, and it's diversified in some of the stronger names, and probably take off some of the money when you have a huge upside, and reallocate as you go along. It's not a set it and forget it plan.
Yeah. Good point. All right. I'm glad we outlined these. A couple other notable companies too, and we'll talk about those in future shows. Is Cybin, that's definitely one. I know a lot of people have reached out regarding Numinous. They made some news actually this week. They sold all their clinics, and it looks like they're going to become more of a SaaS platform. So I'm curious to see how that would work. But we'll keep making sure that we keep this dialogue going with this space. If there's any information or any shows that you want us to basically focus on, or specific companies in this space, let us know your comments. I'd love to get your feedback on whether or not you find this psychedelic show and some of these key companies that we're going to outline is helpful for you. And if you're most importantly, if you're interested, so leave some comments below. We'd love to get your feedback. Bill, as usual, always appreciate the hard work and research that you do. I hope some people got some great, I guess, education on how to best approach drug development companies in a new emerging industry. I thought it was well explained. And let's keep in touch. We'll check back in with you next Sunday. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for watching. Hey, we're humming along, and it's all because of you and the audience and community that we're building. So, again, make sure to smash on that like button and leave lots of comments. Who do we have up next? You let us know. Who should we interview? What companies? Is there anything you like? Is there anything we're missing? We're all here for you. Let's get on with each other and build this community for all of us to benefit. As usual, don't forget to subscribe to our channel because in the end, we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone.